At the beginning of the movie, an auto mechanic named Paul works in his garage. Then Paul makes a video call with his daughter, Beth, who is currently attending school in the city. But after seeing the look on his daughter's face, Paul asks if she is okay. Beth replied that she was just tired and not getting enough rest. Paul tried to believe her, but he sensed that she was in trouble.
Just, tired.
A lot of work.
The next morning, when Paul picked up the mail, he found a letter from Beth's school, which revealed a lingering problem with unpaid tuition. This discovery prompted him to immediately contact Beth for an explanation. However, when he called her, an unknown person suddenly answered. Although Paul asked about Beth, the person simply scoffed and abruptly ended the call. Subsequent attempts to contact Beth were fruitless. Filled with mounting concern for his daughter's well-being, Paul left a heartfelt voicemail, pleading for Beth to return his call. He then contacted the school and learned that Beth's dormitory had been empty for a long time. Instead of immediately involving the police, Paul took matters into his own hands, hitching a plane ride to Beth's location to investigate her puzzling disappearance himself. Upon arrival, he finds no response at her door, leading him to make the difficult decision to enter. Inside, he's met with an eerie emptiness, as if the place had been deserted for a considerable duration. In his search, he stumbles upon a photograph featuring Beth alongside another girl he assumes to be her friend. Paul then decides to visit a local bar, a popular spot among the younger crowd, hoping to find some trace of Beth's whereabouts. Engaging the bartender in conversation, he inquires about the girls, only to draw a blank. Determined to uncover the truth, Paul chooses to bide his time, patiently waiting until he spots the young woman entering the establishment, accompanied by her date. He steps in, introducing himself as Beth's father, but the young woman refuses to share any information. Paul ends up in a minor scuffle with some guys at the bar due to his persistence. Eventually, the girl agrees to talk if he buys her a meal. When she introduces herself as Angela, she initially tries to evade giving a direct answer. However, with Paul's insistence, she opens up about Beth meeting a guy named Eddie in New Orleans and getting mixed up with some unsavory characters. Paul is eager to leave immediately and offers Angela $500 to take him to Eddie.
You drive me down there, right now I'll give you some money. Thank you. Check.
The next morning, they hit the road. Angela wonders why he wouldn't involve the police, but Eddie explains that law enforcement typically waits 48 hours before acting in such cases. They reach New Orleans, arriving at the spot where Angela first encountered Eddie. Paul cautions her to stay away from him, hinting at his reputation in the city. He enters the building first, which turns out to be a nightclub. Angela heads to the restroom, inhales something harmful, and then heads to the dance floor, opting for a different approach instead of pointing out Eddie. She attempts to seduce Paul, seeking to have some fun, but Paul, realizing he can't waste any time, heads out. Angela spots one of Eddie's associates, prompting Paul to approach and inquire about Eddie's whereabouts. The man refuses, leading to an attack on Paul that leaves him knocked to the ground. As the assailants prepare to depart, Paul rises to his feet and unleashes a furious assault on the man and his two companions. He seizes one of their cell phones and swiftly returns to the car, leaving Angela in shock over the brutal scene she just witnessed. Paul instructs Angela to send a text to Eddie from the phone, and they find refuge in a rundown motel while they await his response. Angela is curious about Paul's identity, taking note of the force with which he confronted the men. She expresses reluctance to involve the police and arranges for accommodations off the books. Paul, however, refrains from providing details and encourages her to get some rest. Meanwhile, he is consumed by thoughts of his daughter and her well-being. Determined to regain his composure, Paul freshens up, exposing a large eagle tattoo on his back, marked by bullet wounds. Upon spotting a tattoo bearing his late wife's name, Angela learns of her unfortunate demise from leukemia. They receive a response from Eddie, who happens to be at a nearby club. Angela points him out within the bar, prompting Paul to hand her the money and instruct her to leave. Once inside, Paul catches the eye of a man who recognizes him. He locates Eddie and inquires about Beth, only to be met with denial. When Eddie attempts to show disrespect towards Beth, Paul sternly advises him to exercise caution. A man intervenes, revealing himself as Eddie's uncle Stuart. He extends an apology to Paul on Eddie's behalf, pleading for leniency. Eddie begins to grasp the gravity of his predicament. Stuart discloses his involvement in an 8-man team that Paul single-handedly thwarted, inexplicably sparing him. Paul, who had been sipping water until now, divulges that he used to consume alcohol back in those days, taking a sip for emphasis. Eddie then admits to previously dating Beth, who, unfortunately, became entangled with a dealer known as the Pharmacy. He provides Paul with the location. Before departing, Paul somberly informs Stuart that he had run out of ammunition that fateful night when they attempted to assail him. Stepping outside, he finds Angela still waiting, and they depart together.
That guy gives me the creeps, man.
They soon discover they're being trailed by two thugs who contact a local crime boss named Omar, confirming their pursuit of Paul. Omar desires to have them capture Paul and bring him to him, while his assistant Mark attempts to persuade him to let Paul go. However, Omar's thirst for revenge knows no bounds.
Let's go get him. Right now.
The thugs initiate a pursuit, firing at Paul's car and attempting to force him off the road.
You're okay.
After a protracted chase, Paul manages to cause them to crash instead. He proceeds to interrogate one of the men, who discloses that Omar dispatched them. Paul instructs the man to warn Omar to steer clear of his path, then dispatches the incapacitated and wounded driver. Returning to the motel, Angela is visibly shaken by the events and demands explanations. Paul then recounts his background, revealing that he was born in the city and joined the military. However, upon leaving, he transitioned into a hitman for Omar. The mounting violence led him to question his allegiance. In a poignant flashback, we witness Omar with his family on his daughter's first day of school. In a twist of fate, his wife decided to take his car instead, which tragically exploded soon after. Paul, having been present during the explosive incident intended for Omar, realizes the extent to which Omar will go to use his daughter against him.
They're gonna kill Beth if I don't get to her first.
Understanding that Angela is also in grave danger, Paul arranges for her to stay with an old contact and brings her to a spacious hotel for safety. Paul's acquaintance, Sam, inquires about the pharmacy. Learning that the person is erratic but intends to confront him, Sam becomes apprehensive, aware of the potential dangers. Despite the risks, driven by their shared history, Sam opts to aid Paul once he departs from Angela.
Clean.
Angela ponders whether Sam might send reinforcements to assist Paul, but Sam assures her that Paul requires no assistance, emphasizing his formidable reputation earned as the prince who once controlled a significant territory in New Orleans. He advises Angela to steer clear of Paul for her own safety. Paul makes his way to a nearby gun shop, where he discreetly reveals a tattoo on his hand. However, this gesture prompts the shopkeeper to draw a weapon on him. The shopkeeper recognizes the tattoo from stories passed down by his father, indicating that he's aware of the reputation associated with those who bear it. Paul tells the man that he and his father were friends, and he's just here to retrieve some items he left with him. The man guides Paul to a hidden cache of guns, but they prove to be unusable. As a result, the man offers Paul 2 of his own firearms. Afterwards, Paul proceeds to the pharmacy, where the man stationed at the door takes his gun. Navigating through a building teeming with addicts, Paul finally reaches the pharmacy, or rather, 50 Cent, as he humorously puts it. Paul cautions that he's taking Beth from the premises, and no one can impede him. However, the pharmacy insists that Beth is there of her own accord. He then exposes Beth, asleep in the room and heavily under the influence, prompting Paul to rush to her side. The men then draw their guns on Paul, revealing they received a call from Omar instructing them to apprehend both Paul and Beth. In a swift move, Paul disarms one of the thugs and dispatches all the men in the room. Seizing Beth, he commences a gunfire-filled escape. Although Paul sustains a stab wound, he presses on until he safely returns Beth to the car and speeds away. Later, Mark arrives at the building where one man is on the brink of death. He inquires about Paul, but the man is unable to provide any answers and is fatally shot. They all regroup at Sam's hotel, where Paul tends to his wounds. Sam discloses that Paul's name has caused quite a commotion in the streets, which is why working on their escape vehicle is taking longer than expected. Mark learns about Paul in the motel and is aware of Sam's deception.
We have a chance to get him.
Omar mobilizes every man he has. Paul heads to the Beth, who is embarrassed to go back home, but Paul informs that his affection for her is unwavering. Subsequently, a group of vehicles arrives at the hotel, carrying Mark and his soldiers, exiting and encircling the structure. Paul, meanwhile, immediately prioritizes Angela, since he can't keep Beth and her safe at the same time. Later, after Mark and his troops begin their places, he issues the command, and men outside are free to open fire on Sam and Paul. Both of them fired back, and are able to murder the guys. Amidst the chaos, Mark seizes the opportunity, eliminating Sam's men and abducting Beth. Upon hearing the gunshots, Paul rushes in, but is pinned down by a hail of bullets. Paul and Sam retaliate swiftly, neutralizing the assailant before giving chase. The pursuit leads to a dramatic shootout with Mark, but he manages to escape with Beth. After dealing with the remaining threats, they discover that Angela's driver met a fatal end. Paul, determined, takes Angela under his protection and they return to the gun store. There, the proprietor equips Paul with powerful rifles. Paul's arrival at Omar's stronghold is nothing short of a warpath, as he unleashes a torrent of bullets, swiftly dispatching every adversary in his path. The climax intensifies as Paul, armed and resolute, takes Beth with him, displaying his unparalleled combat prowess as he systematically clears each floor. His focused determination leads him to a confrontation with Omar, who holds Beth hostage at gunpoint. Paul proposes a bargain, offering Omar his life in exchange for Beth's safety. Tensions escalate as Omar accuses Paul of causing the death of his family, threatening retribution against Beth. Paul defends his actions, explaining they were unintended consequences. Despite Paul's plea, Omar is poised to harm Beth, ultimately retreating from the scene. A fierce face-off ensues between Paul and Mark. Paul, overpowered, resorts to lethal force, shooting Mark. In a daring move, Beth seizes an opportunity, striking Omar and enabling Paul to eliminate the threat. The three escape together, leaving the chaos behind. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy, hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. You should watch the full movie. Thank you very much for watching.